Hi, welcome to today's video. We're going to take a look at making your life easier when you're doing your data flows or ETL, and that is how to translate from source data codes to the data warehouse codes that you want to use for reporting. And you do that with what I have named helper tables. And part of the helper table process allows you to do your work much more easily in your coding, whether it be through a high-level language or something at a lower level, rather than creating some type of really sophisticated conversion within that. And so just basically an overview and summarization of the problem is that each transactional system will have its own reference data. That's the way they run. They don't want to talk to each other going from one system to another. But if you're building a federated data warehouse, you don't want to have a dimension for each piece of data that comes out of each of your source systems. Instead, what you want to do is have a single federated dimension that consolidates all that miscellaneous reference data into the codes that you want to use for reporting. Because sometimes reporting codes are going to be either more restricted or having a different definition than you would have coming in from the source systems that they maintain. And in this, we're going to use Daisy Hill's breed data because we have multiple systems that all utilize the coding of the puppy's breed. But in the data warehouse, we just want one single source of what those breeds are. So we'll look at how helper tables will do this. What we're going to discuss basically is why do you have helper tables, what it looks like from the data warehouse dimension, how to use spreadsheets, and more importantly, how to handle unknown values that come in because the source systems change, and it would be really nice if they told you at the data warehouse level that they're changing. But typically you find out only when a value will need to be rejected. And this is where I use the unknown classification in all of my dimensions to handle this. And then also we'll talk a little bit about maintaining that as it goes through. So what do we want to do? Well, let's take a look from a spreadsheet standpoint what we want that dimension to be. So here is our breed dimension that we want to have in the data warehouse. We have our unknown, which is -1, our 0, which is none, which means that no value has been given. And then we have the breeds that we want to utilize, and then we also have this mixed breed at the very end. These are the codes that we associate with them, and these are the name that we want to see come out in the reports. From a dimensional standpoint, that becomes extremely straightforward. We have our breed dimension, our warehouse ID, the breed code, and the breed name. Then the question becomes, how do we want to manage this going across our multiple source systems? And again, you can build an application to do this, or you can use spreadsheets. I like to do my work in the spreadsheets and then figure out how to actually maintain this as a secondary source. But essentially here we have our breed names. We've really reduced this down just to make this a little bit easier to digest rather than the full set that's going on. So here are the breeds that we have, and the training system has these breed codes coming out. And you notice that there's a bit of differentiation between what they would like to call feral and mixed, but we like to call all of them mixed. We have a mutt, a labradoodle, and a Chaldean coming through. From the adoption system, we have some different codes that have the same meaning going into it. And so we've created this spreadsheet so we can get an idea of what's going on. But what I really want to do is make something that is much more easily digestible and maintainable from the data warehouse standpoint. And so I will create a breed helper table that has this definition. It has the warehouse ID that we're going to be assigning it. I have the source system and the source code. So each of the source systems will be referenced identified within here. And then just for completeness purposes, I went ahead and put the breed code and the breed name here so that it's visually available to us when we're doing a maintenance standpoint. And so then for the first cut of this, I would take my spreadsheet and I would convert it into data that would fit within the helper table. And so you can see there's a variety of mixes that we want to come up with, both from the training standpoint and from the adoption standpoint. But then this is the name that I've given to those systems. Here are the codes, how we translate the codes into it. So it becomes very easy to utilize this from an ETL or a workflow standpoint, is that we just simply say this is the source system, this is the source code, and then this value is what it becomes. And you have repetition going through here because it's the way you translate back to the federated dimension. Pretty straightforward. You can do this with a lookup. You can do this with a join. There's a lot of ways that you can do this, but at the end of that flow, you simply will be referencing into the warehouse ID associated with the breeds, and you will now have a consistent piece of data. So let's then take the next step and say, well, what happens should an unknown value comes through here? Basically, they've added something new. Such as a red terrier or something like that we weren't expecting, and it comes in the source system. Well, there's a lot of ways that you can handle this, and you need to talk to your business as well as take a look at your ETL design. One school of thought says you simply reject that record and don't bring it into your data warehouse because it doesn't match. Well, what this does is means that you have to post process that data after you update your breed helper table and possibly update your breed dimension table as well. And so for a while your counts will be off. That's where I've come up with the concept of the unknown, which means that if I find something that I do not know its value, I give it a -1 within that translation, so therefore it shows up as a count, and it also stands out as a value that is new and needs to be handled. And it's also very easy to go ahead and do a report so you can see how they grow over day nature. But we also want to do is go ahead and create a storage for this information so that either we can post process it from here or that we can just actually see. So if this unknown came in, we would then write a record into our unknown log, which has the source system, the source code, and some details about the transaction as well as a timestamp for when it occurred. Theoretically, we might be able to reprocess it from this text field, depending upon how you define it. But it also gives you a chance to take a look at what was coming in and decide whether you want to leave it as an unknown or actually reprocess it. And so that always brings up the question of what do you need to do for that unknown? A couple of ways that you can deal with that unknown. And those include, but are not limited to, let's very quickly go in our presentation and get to that point, what to do with them. Well, number one, always want to log them. Know that it happened. How you deal with after you've logged it is your choice. You may want to develop an application to manage that helper table so that you can reapply any changes that are known. You can also still do that from a spreadsheet. Many times a business is much happier dealing with a spreadsheet than dealing with an application that you've developed using Java or some other language. There are also third-party applications that would help you manage this kind of reference data, and I would look into those to see if they are right for your organization. Either way, there needs to be a pathway to correct that data. Typically, you would want to possibly update the transactions that's in the data warehouse, or you might need to rebuild the entire fact table from history. And it also depends on how often things change. You might want to have a manual way that you can go ahead and correct this, or an automated way as well. But in one data warehouse that we were building, a data mart, the data was changing so fast that we could not keep up with the changes in the reference data. So what we ended up doing is coming up with a plan by which we talk to the business that since your data is changing so rapidly, is your old data really meaningful to you? If so, how old do you like to go back? And it turned out that for them, 6 months worth of data was all they ever really wanted to report on because their data was changing quickly. And when they saw trends, they were changing their data and their utilization of that data in order to keep up with the way that the business was going. So we simply said that we can rebuild your entire fact from the history tables, and 6 months meant that we could basically do it in a day, and they were happy with being offline 1 day a week, typically Sunday, so we could rebuild that history. But again, this means taking a look at yourself, seeing what it is that you want to do. So in summary, if we look at this, helper tables are definitely something you want to use. And what it is that your helper table can do for you is make your coding simpler and end up with some federated or single point of truth in your data warehouse by using that helper table, maintaining that helper table in order to assist in your workflow to get the proper data into your data warehouse. Simple subject, one that people typically don't fall into unless they have experience within a data warehouse. So I'm hoping that this will give you a leg up on your other work that you're doing to make your ETL and your workflow development much easier. As always, please subscribe. Let me know you're out there. Drop a comment if you like this. Drop some information if you want to know some additional processing to deal with, either within helper tables with any of your data warehouse design at all. I look forward to hearing from y'all. Otherwise, have a great day. I appreciate you watching.